Good morning, everybody. Are we happy to be back in the chapel this morning? It came to my mind that for some of you, first time here, other than a class, this is your first time experiencing chapel here. Sadly, it's not what it used to be with everybody cramming in to the seats, but we are very happy, very blessed to be back. Some announcements for you this morning. Rumors have been going around about dorms closing and about doing closed dorms. That is not fully true. We are deciding to follow alongside the executive order of the state, meaning that you cannot have more than two different households together in the same house at one time or the same space at one time. So individual dorm rooms count as a housing space, apartments count as their own housing space, and then houses themselves are a space. So if somebody from Day Hall had somebody from each of the dorms over, that is not allowed. They could have somebody from Preston or one person from Aletheia or one room in Aletheia and so on. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Kyle, Jim, any of the student affairs staff would love to answer those for you. Thanksgiving lunch got moved to today instead of tomorrow. So today's starting at 11. Does it open at 11:30? Kyle, is that? Okay, opening at 11:30. Thanksgiving lunch down at the dining hall. It's going to be awesome. Come see us. We're helping serve. So it's going to be a good time with some amazing food. And then lastly, if you are planning to go home after Thanksgiving break and stay home and do online classes from there, please let your RAs know, please let us know, please let somebody know. But along with that, there is a miniature checkout process in which we ask you to, unless you are in a house, please unplug your fridge, unplug any electronics so that nothing wrong can go there, no mold can grow in your fridge. Please remove any perishable foods that'll be in there for a month and a half. We don't want any rats, ants, or any of those problems happening. So other than that, welcome to Baker Chapel. Welcome those who are online, and I'll hand it over to Leo.
Hello. Good morning. Please stand if you're able. Welcome back to chapel. If you're here, if you're online, we're so excited to be here with you guys. So let's worship together, amen. We live in a time that there's a lot of uncertainties and a lot of doubts and a lot of things that can kind of distract us. So we lose focus on what matters. We lose focus on family, we lose focus on our work, we lose focus on our mission, our calling, ministries. And at this time, every single day, God is calling us and he's saying, my son, my daughter, it is well. It is well. I'm here with you. I'm fighting for you. You don't have to stress. You don't have to be agitated. I'm here. It is well. Grandeur earth's great before, moved by the sound of his voice, sees it all shaken and stirred, can be calm and broken from my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well with me. Sing far be it. Far be from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. So through it all, and through it So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The ways and ways to know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The ways and ways to know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The ways and ways to know His name. The ways and ways to know His name. Let's declare it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Sing, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Through it all, through it all, through it all, my eyes on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes on you. It is well with me. Say worthy, worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Say, we live for you. We live for you. Now let's declare, say, holy, holy, there is no one like you. There there is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Say, worthy of every song. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Say Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. So worthy, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Say holy and holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those. Say it again, say holy and holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to the. Say, I will build my life and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life is no one like you. There is none beside. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Thank you, God, for this day. We praise you, we worship you, we lift your name high. We praise a living God, a powerful God. There's nothing that is impossible to you, God. So we deliver everything that we have, everything that we are in your hands. And everything that we built, we want to build on your foundation, which is your love. God, be with us today and every day during the season, God, that we trust in you, that we believe that it is well with my soul. God, we want to pray for the message today. And the speaker, God, that you may use the speaker, and the words coming out of his mouth will be the words from your throne. God, we want to receive transformation today. We want to open our hearts, open our minds, and receive what you had for us. Thank you so much for all the people that are involved in this, God. I pray for every single student around the campus, online, and everywhere that they are, God. Touch them, be with them. Give us your protection. And free us from all the schemes of the enemy, God. We praise you, we love you, we worship you. And we ask all these things in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, we say, amen. You may be seated.
Thank you, Peter and Leo, for your time of ministry to us through worship. And I just want to say thank you for all that you've endured navigating life over the last couple of months in the gym and doing such a great job. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. If you are watching online and you were in the gym for the last couple of months, I highly encourage you to check out the chapel either before or after Thanksgiving as you come back to campus to check out chapels again here. I am really thankful to introduce our speaker today. His name is Jordan Stonehouse, and Jordan is a product of Wyoming, moved away for a while, came back as soon as he could because he felt God moving him to do so. So I don't want to steal his thunder or his story, so maybe he can share a little bit of that with you. But Jordan is married, has 2 kids, Lincoln and Bridget. They live right here in Wyoming, and God has placed it on his heart to plant a church out of the Harbor Churches group, which is what I am affiliated with. I go to South Harbor down in Byron Center. And Harbor Churches is building or going to plant or starting a plant in Wyoming here. So Jordan, if you would come up with me, I will pray for you, and then we can start things. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for Jordan. Thank you for good sandwiches at Fresh Coast where we can chat and talk and dream together about how Grace Christian University and Wyoming Harbor Church can continue to build together your kingdom right here in our wonderful city. So, Lord, be with Jordan today. Allow his words to flow like milk and honey. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. I think I might switch out my thingy here. Kyle, you smell good this morning.
I could smell you through my mask. That means something. And through my own breath, which smells like McDonald's coffee today. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here this morning. Hello to everybody online, and hello to everybody here. Like Kyle said, product of Wyoming, and definitely moved back when I felt God tugging my heart to come back to Wyoming. And it's kind of cool, actually, because when I moved to back to Wyoming. I did so because it felt like certainly God wanted me here, but I also had like a heart for diversity. And I was working at Hope Reformed Church, formerly Hope Reformed Church on Burton and Kalamazoo, and I started a like young adult program thing on Friday nights with Grace University students. So every Friday night we'd go play Body Body, if you're familiar with that game. It's like the least Christian game to play, but it's not terrible. It's just like Mafia, but in real form. But so it's cool to be back here with you today, especially with what God has been opening up and beginning in my life back in Wyoming. So I'm really thankful for your receptivity, and I'm assuming you got smiles behind all your masks. So let me start today. Kyle said that I'm a dad of 2, so I'm going to do a little show and tell today. My son Lincoln is going to be 3 in a couple of days, and my daughter Bridget is, I think, 8 months. She was born in COVID, so it kind of feels like 8 years, but I think she's about 8 months right now. But this is one of Lincoln's favorite books. It's a book about emotions and feelings. And so we'll go up into his room every night, and we get to read 2 books before he goes to bed for nap time and for bedtime. And this book basically has, like, I don't even know what sort of animal that is. Maybe a bear, maybe a wolf. I'm not sure. It's a very neutral animal. But basically what it is you got a little, like, feeling of the day or on that page, and then face expression that shows that, and then Lincoln will have to like mimic it. So, this is actually his favorite word, content. He doesn't know what it means, but he loves to say it. And so I'll show it to him, and then he has to try and make that face. But it's got all sorts of different emotions in it. It's got enraged, which has got the little puffy-eared cartoon thing there. And then it's got excited, sad, frustrated, all these emotions, and I just kind of flip to whatever random page that I can. And at the very end, it's got a very psychologically interesting mirror at the end. So I'm reading him these things, and then I get to the end, and there I am. I'm like, who are you? I just have this like dilemma every day, like, who is this man I'm looking at in the mirror? And it has the little text on the bottom that says, how do you feel today? And so I always turn that to him, and like I said, content is his favorite word. He doesn't know the meaning of it, but how are you doing today, buddy? I'm content. And in my head, I'm like, you think you're content, but I literally had to just carry you up the stairs, kicking and screaming to go to nap time. So you're not really content, but I love you anyways. But every time I flip to that page that has the mirror in it, I just get that like literally self-reflecting moment, like there I am. I'm asking him all of these questions. And then there's my image. There's me. There's my story. And so I'm going to say a little bit more about this as we go. But I think it's interesting that you guys this year have chosen to spend time on, was it the unheard voices? Is that the theme this year? The voices in the Bible that are not spoken about very often. And I think that's pretty cool because oftentimes those kind of minor voices, like the background singers, the background dancers, whatever you want, on the profiles that we don't often examine, there's still something huge that God wants us to see within that story. That's why it's included in His Word. So today we're going to be in Daniel chapter 4. So if you want to flip there or scroll there, whatever you need to do to get there, we're going to be in Daniel chapter 4. And usually when you're talking from Daniel, you're talking about Daniel. And I'm only going to talk about him just a little bit. Instead, we're going to talk about a guy named Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar. And that is a 5-syllable word. Actually, it's 6 if you include King Nebuchadnezzar. So I'm going to give myself the freedom today to refer to him as Nebi, if that's okay. So I'm just going to call him King Nebi if I feel like it, because I don't want to take all of my time saying his name a million times. So we're going to talk about King Nebi. Actually, I feel really nerdy saying that, so maybe I'll just go Nebuchadnezzar. But he was the king of Babylon, if you're familiar with him. At this time, it was like 600 BC. He was the most powerful man in the world, the most powerful person in the world. And he interacts with Daniel in the first few chapters of this book. And so he was a man that was known to have like dreams that were significant. And there was two dreams throughout the whole book of Daniel. There's 3 different kings that Daniel interacts with. This is the first one. And he has 2 different dreams that Daniel had to interpret. And so I'm going to start in chapter 19 of Daniel, verse 19 in Daniel chapter 4. There's a lot I'm going to read, but I'm going to slice it up. And I want to carry you with me because I think that, I don't know if the administration knew that there would be a shutdown again. But what I think God has laid on my heart to share with you feels so appropriate and timely today. So I'm going to read verse 19, which is going to kind of slingshot me to tell you a little bit more about our boy Nebi. We'll just call him that. We're bros now, me and Nebi. But verse 19 in chapter 4 says this: Then Daniel, called Belteshazzar, I'll say more about that in a minute, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. The king said, Belshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you. So this was the second dream that Daniel was asked to interpret for King Nebuchadnezzar. But Daniel was deeply perplexed and terrified of having to interpret this dream for this person. And let me tell you why. Because if you rewind to Daniel chapter 1, it starts with a moment when Daniel, as a teenager, maybe 13, 14 years old, was living in Judah, in the nation of Israel, and he was kidnapped. And the city was besieged by this king, by this guy who was trying to build his dynasty, trying to build his glory within the kingdom of Babylon. And so what they did is they besieged the city that Daniel lived in. They killed everybody that was able-bodied, that could fight. They left all the people that were not a physical threat to them to work the vineyards so that they could have slave labor there. And they kidnapped Daniel and a few other people that had sharp minds, I guess, and potential to come back to Babylon and basically like brainwash them. They human trafficked them. They kidnapped Daniel out of his homeland in order to like systematically reorient him to the Babylonian life. This is the guy we're talking about that took him from his homeland. And that name, Belteshazzar, I think is how you say it, they reassigned his name. So for most of the book, it refers to like Daniel, who was also called this. In this context, they were brainwashing him and giving him a new name, which Belshazzar is the name after like a Babylonian god. So they were trying to strip Daniel of all of his like Hebrew Jewishness. And in chapter 2, that's when Daniel has his first like interpretive moment. This is crazy. So King Nebuchadnezzar gets all of these people that he brings in to be kind of his wise inner court. So Daniel, he actually has a pretty decent situation when he's there because they're grooming him to be a leader and kind of brainwashing him out of what he came from into what they wanted him to be. So he was in kind of the king's court. You might know that already, but at this point in chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar has this dream that terrified him, right? That's the first one. We're not going to talk about what the contents of that dream are necessarily, but he had said, so he's freaked out by that dream, and he gathered all the wise men, and I think it says like the magicians and the diviners and all these other like big titles of wise people to come, and he demanded that you tell me what my dream was, which is a terribly impossible task already, and give me the interpretation of it, or I'll cut you to pieces and bring your house down to a rubble. This is the guy now. And Daniel did have the power to interpret in the wisdom that God gave him to actually tell this king what his dream was and what the interpretation was. And so he wasn't cut to pieces, but that's who this guy is. That's who King Nebuchadnezzar is and was. And that's why Daniel, when we get to this moment in Daniel chapter 4, is a little terrified again because he knows who he's dealing with. He's dealing with the most powerful man in the world that threatened to cut him to pieces if he doesn't get the interpretation right. So we're going to skip to verse 24 now because this is Daniel telling him what the interpretation of this second dream was. But it kind of, within the interpretation, tells you what the dream was about. Really, what I want to talk about is not necessarily even the contents of this dream, even though I'm going to read this section. It's what's happened to Nebuchadnezzar for the rest of this story. So in verse 24, it says this. This is the interpretation. So this is Daniel speaking to King Nebi right now. It says, Your Majesty, this is the decree the Most High has issued against you, the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals and eat the grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by. So 7 times, that the word times there means a year. So 7 years will pass by until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms of the earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, Your Majesty, be pleased. Be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. Daniel knows what it's like to not be treated kindly, and it may be that your prosperity will continue. So Daniel, how are you feeling, Daniel? You just told the most powerful man in the world that he's going to lose all of his power and he is going to be in isolation from people until he recognizes that he's no longer the most powerful person in the universe. How do you feel, Daniel? That's not a very comforting interpretation of a dream, is it? And that's actually a very dark future for Nebuchadnezzar, too. So he didn't threaten to cut him to pieces this time, though. So it's interesting to see the difference between that first dream and the second. But it says this right after that. So Daniel gave him this interpretation of the dream, what was going to come, and then in verse 28, it says, All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof. So 12 months after the king was given the interpretation of what this dream was going to be, he was pondering that future for all of that time, you know. So if you knew that your life was going to hit like a terribly dark period like this, that would be a pretty terrifying 12 months to know what it actually is going to look like. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, Is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? So I'm sure you all, before you came here this morning, left the roof of your royal palace before you came here, and you surveyed the dynasty that you've built. I know I certainly did, right? Like, of course not. It's kind of hard to understand what that would be like, to be someone of such great power where you could literally look as far as your eye can see and you like dominated it. But the questions he asked were interesting to me as I think about my life. I sometimes live and function as if I'm the king and ruler of it. And the questions that he asked when he knew that his life was going to be facing challenge were, is it possible that somebody else could really be in control of my life? Because I'm a very powerful person, and I know what my life is supposed to look like. I know the plan that I have laid out because I'm the king of my own life. I'm the king of my own world. But verse 31 will continue, says, Even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. And it says immediately, the next verse, verse 33, immediately what had said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched in dew, the dew of heaven, until his hair grew like feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. So I have been in quarantine. I got off of quarantine as of a week ago. So I had COVID, and I think that description feels like what I felt like I looked like while I was in quarantine. Can anybody relate to that? Like, my hair is long, I let my beard go, I didn't shower that much, and I was just kind of dirty at that point. So this king is now sleeping in the dirt for 7 years. He's detached and isolated from people. He's stripped of the authority that he had over his life. And I joke about what I looked like, or felt like I looked like during quarantine. But as I read this story and I think about what it means for you and me, I actually think, especially in lieu of another wave of the effect of COVID, I think it might feel similar to what he felt. I think that there might be some people in here or some people online that feel like the last 9 months of COVID has been you living in the dirt by yourself. Maybe for some of you, the plans that you thought you had are harder to see now, because maybe it feels like you've been pushed away from the vision that God gave you. You're here at a Christian university, right? I'm a pastor. Like, we all, I think, are trying to live a life that's following in the footsteps of Jesus and listening to the voice of the Spirit in our lives to, like, be used by God and for God. And yet, maybe you feel like the rug has been swept from underneath your feet. So how are you feeling today? If we look at Nebuchadnezzar, he was guided by God to be pushed to a place where he was alone, sleeping in the dirt, feeling these things. Are you anxious today? Are you sad? Are you mad? I think he was brought to that place to look in that mirror and get an accurate view of himself, actually. And I think maybe for some of us, this is the posture that your life feels like it's in right now. Things feel stuck. You feel like you're living in the dirt. And if you were asked how you feel today, maybe you're just mad. Even as you understand the precautions that need to be taken around this thing, right? Like, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to take time to ask yourself, like, how do I feel about this? And it's okay for those answers to be, I just feel really sad right now. And maybe things within you are being revealed through this quarantine that you didn't know existed, and God is showing you, like, who you are. And I hope that you are able to more recognize that you're a beloved child of God. I hope that that is becoming more clear. But there's also something else. It's interesting to me. If we read the next verse, verse 34, it says, at the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, he's actually been, like, kind of these were his words. This whole chapter was his words. He says, "At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanity was restored. And then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever." So what did it take for Nebuchadnezzar to get out of that, to get out of the dirt? When we think of our lives being in the dirt today, too, right? And I'm a feeler. Like, I'll tell you, like, I'm reading my son this book because I'm asking these questions of myself every day. I think adults are just sophisticated children on the inside still. And I spend a lot of time monitoring my heart and sometimes just trying to feel better. Maybe you can relate to that too. But what I think I'm seeing in this story is I don't have to have it all figured out. I think the thing that actually changed the heart of this man, who was so far from God before God pushed him to that wilderness moment, is he had to lift his eyes and praise the God who is higher than him, who is higher than his situation. So for me as a feeler, it's really encouraging to me to know that God met him there. And it's why I love worship music so much, because sometimes I'm trying to figure out the logic of the situation. I'm trying to figure out and wish that maybe I didn't feel life so much or that I had the answers. You guys are here studying for a career or a calling in your life. Like, I get that pressure. But my invitation today, and I think it's coming from God, is no matter where you find yourself, if you're in the dirt, if you feel like you're 7 years removed from anybody, 6 feet and 7 years removed from human contact, that maybe before your feelings align and you feel better about your situation, and I'm totally talking to Jordan here, maybe it's time to lift our eyes to the God that is the Most High, to the one that has the plans for your life in his hands, and they're good. They might not be exactly what you think. I did not think that God would choose 2020, the year of COVID-19, for us to plant a church. It's literally the worst year, probably in human history, to try and start something that largely centers on gathering people up. The church is more than just the gathering. It's more than just a building, for sure. It's more than just an hour. It's the people everywhere all the time. So God has been teaching me a lot about that. But I know that his thoughts are not my thoughts. His ways are not my ways. So I want to just encourage you from the bottom of my heart and from the Word of God on behalf of this guy whose life somehow changed after all the horrible stuff he had done and after all the power that he had over his life. God humbled him and showed him who he is. So if you find yourself right now in the dirt, or if you know somebody that is in the dirt, and it feels insensitive to say because, like I said, I'm a feeler, and sometimes the last thing that you want to hear when you're not feeling good about a situation is that you just need to trust God, or that you just need to lift your head up. But I'm just going to say it. Lift your head up. The Most High is in control. I think you'll find eventually that you never really were in control that much anyways. That the things that you'll value the most over the course of your life will ironically be the things that found their way to you rather than were meticulously thought out by the plan that you laid out for yourself. I hope what I'm saying is encouraging to you. I'm not telling you or myself to suck it up. I'm not saying not to feel it. I'm just reading a story of a guy who knew the moment was ready to lift his eyes up because he needed to acknowledge that God is the Most High. And that somehow is what changed his life and as far as we know, the rest of his life, to be a worshiper of Yahweh. So let me pray, and then we will go and worship the Most High with our lives in the other places that we live. Father, thank you so much for this beautiful word that you have communicated to us through this story of someone that before this task, I wouldn't have spent time on this chapter. I wouldn't have seen the significance of a children's book in what I feel every time I see it, Lord. But today, this morning, we just acknowledge that you are God and we are not. And that somehow, the release of that control, Lord, for me, and I think for us, is actually quite liberating to know if we trust you, Lord, your plans are good. And even if my friends here in person or the people sitting behind the screen, wherever they're at right now, feel like they're sleeping in the dirt right now, I pray that you will help them lift their head up to see that you are a good God and you have good plans to even use the mud that they sleep in for a story of redemption. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Oh, thank you. Peace be with you, my friends. You may arise and go. Thanks for letting me be the first one this year in the chapel. Really appreciate it.